will go ahead and call this board meeting to order. Time is 7 o'clock on Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda as submitted, and this is for action only, so anybody want to make a motion or any?
I'll move that we accept the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Dawn. Any board discussion? Seeing none. Any public discussion? Seeing none. Any online discussion?
No, Mr. Varner, thank you.
Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. If you guys would join us for the flag salute, which would be presented by Dawn Carini. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, the superintendent report. And this is for information only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to, with your permission, go down in front of the board, and I'd like to invite Mr. Shelby Tuttle and also Miss Amy Robinson to join me. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. It's my privilege to introduce 2 of our newest principals. As you know, over time, the jobs remain, but the faces do change. And I'm really delighted today with the folks who have received the top jobs. I'd like to start first with Mrs. Amy Robinson. She will be the new principal at Carson Middle School, and of course, will be beginning there July 1st. Welcome to the job. Mrs. Robinson is an 18 and a half years strong teacher in our school district. So that's only part of the story. She's also worked 7 years in an administrative role, so 25 years with the district, very significant. She's worked as an implementation specialist, dean of students, and also as vice principal. She has been said by those who know her well to have a positive attitude. She works quickly and efficiently. She makes strong relationships, and she is a good communicator and has a great attitude. So we are really excited to welcome Mrs. Robinson to this position, and I'd like to introduce her to you and offer her an opportunity to answer a few questions, say hello, and respond if you have any questions.
I would just like to say it really is an honor to be selected for this position. I'm excited to be back at Carson Middle School. I've spent a lot of years there, so it's kind of like going home. I'm excited to work with the kids, the staff, the families. It's going to be great. Do you have a question?
I was just going to say, you're also a product of the Carson City School
I am
District.
a product
so
of the
her longevity in this district is
Yes.
longer than mentioned.
Any other board discussion or questions?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
would just like to also welcome you to Carson Middle School again. And thank you for applying for the position. And I know that you'll do great. And I know the kids will enjoy having you there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce Mr. Shelby Tuttle, also not a new face. He has done a lot in our school district. I have Mr. Tuttle for 17 years with the district, 7 years as a teacher. He taught science at Eagle Valley Middle School and also at Carson High School. And he has 10 years of administrative experience. He's worked at both the elementary and the secondary levels. You may have bumped into him at either Mark Twain Elementary or at Bordewick Bray. And he also worked for several years as the dean of students at Carson High School. And Mr. Tuttle is also one of those individuals who build strong relationships with staff, with students, and with parents. He believes in helping students learn from their mistakes. Mr. Tuttle has worked many individual cases at the district level that has involved student discipline. And he's always a very strong advocate for those students and seeks to keep them in school and really to help them learn and to grow and to make better decisions. Certainly is dedicated to his assignments and duties and is known as a hard worker. He calls himself Mr. 6 to 6. That's 6 in the AM and 6 in the PM. So you go by Mr. Tuttle's school and you'll find his car there during most of those hours. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Tuttle. He'll be the new principal at Empire Elementary and give him an opportunity to say hello and introduce himself.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes and board members. I'm very excited about the opportunity to work at Empire Elementary. I'm also grateful for being in service with you all. I think Ms. Macy and I were just discussing about how fortunate we are to work with such good people throughout our district. When we look at the challenges that are faced throughout our state, throughout our nation with regard to our business, it is great to know that we work with good people, that are supportive people, that are approachable, that are available to us to support us as well. So thank you all. I'm very excited about the opportunity to work at Empire as a STEM school, a governor's designated STEM school. They've got some great things going on over there, and Empire's on the rise. So be looking for great things from us. I'm very excited. Thank you all.
Any board comments, questions?
Thank you.
I would just like to say, Mrs. Tuttle, if you do as good a job at Empire as you've done at Boardwick, they're going to be in really good hands. I know the staff there has really appreciated your efforts this year and last year. So I think Empire's in good hands. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Mr. Barner.
You could say the same with Mark Twain. If you asked those people, they were really sad to see you go.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkie. I appreciate that. Thank you all.
And Boardwick's going to miss you, I know that.
Mr. President, members of the board, I just have one small item to add. For any new members to our community, anybody who may have moved here recently, if you have questions about where your child may be attending school, I invite you to contact our offices. We also have a location on our webpage where a family can type in their address, and depending on where that address exists, you'll be able to find out which school your children will attend. But I would just like to make that invitation. Our number is 283-775-283-2100. And again, we would welcome those individuals to our community and look forward to having their children in our school in the fall. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to, congratulations to both of you again. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4, with board reports and board member comments. This is from information only. Update from Nevada Association of School Boards. Do we have one?
Well, you'll all be pleased to see that your NASB directories have finally got out of my car and onto your hot little hands. So I appreciate getting those out. And then I think Laurel maybe could update us on the search for a new executive director, because I don't have quite all that information.
Yes, so the executive committee is going to be interviewing candidates for the new executive director position this Friday and Saturday morning. And also the NASB award nomination forms went out this week. So if you have someone you would like to nominate, start thinking about it before our next meeting so that we can make sure that we get our nominations completed before they are due August 13th, and we'd rather not write them on the 12th. So,
And if there's any members of the public that would like to make us aware of some people that should get awards, we'd appreciate that too.
Thank you for the update. We'll go ahead and move on to any board members' comments or reports.
I'd just like to thank all of the middle school and the high schools that Pioneer and Carson Heights graduation were great. I've always thought that when we got out of COVID, we wouldn't have the drive-throughs anymore. But Carson Middle and Eagle Valley did that, and I thought, well, this isn't gonna work. But they were the best graduations ever. The cars, all the family got to come, and you got to see the individuality. There was one student that was just totally beautiful. She looked like she was on the red carpet. She had this silver gown, and her family was all proud, and you could read about their little stories on their windows as they came by, and it was just really, really good. Except Mr. Test does not need to take pictures with every single student. And I already told Amy, so hopefully that won't happen next year. But they were all really good, and I really appreciated to be involved with them.
Thank you, Stacy. Don?
From Dr. Conley at Eagle Valley. He actually did a survey of parents, and they actually preferred the drive-through over, just being in the gym. Also, an announcement from Lee Conley. Throughout the school year, students who were recognized for just doing the right thing and being responsible and respectful were given wristbands for 1 day of free SSA, no uniforms. Those students' names were then entered into a drawing for a free bike and helmet. Maggie Portillo, our school social worker, worked with the Safe Routes to School coordinator at the time, who was Kelly Norman, and she's part of the Public Works Department for Carson City, and they donated the bikes. And there were 4 winners: Hannah Ingram, Jimena Rico Herrera, Alexia Lopez, and Cameron Sitlington. And that's all I have.
Oh, thank you, Don, and congratulations to those guys. Lupe?
I do not have a report this evening.
Thank you. Laurel?
I don't have a report, just would like to wish everyone a happy summer and remind them to plan your trips because it's going to go quick. It's already feeling like it's going too fast.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a board report tonight either, but I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in the Carson Middle School graduation procession, and I thought it did go good. My granddaughter graduated or promoted, I guess, from 8th grade this year at Carson Middle, and she enjoyed it. The family enjoyed it, and so I think it went overall pretty good. And I wanted to thank Stacy and Dawn. I think you guys made every graduation, is that right? Or most of them? Stacy, you did? Thank you. And Dawn, I think you made a lot of them.
I was 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4, that's it. Well, thank you, guys. Any association reports tonight? Loretta?
Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've been here. I'd like to say good evening, President Warner, trustees, and administration, and Renee. I'm Loretta Marson. I'm representative for CESA. And CESA would like to congratulate Amy Robinson as the new principal at Carson Middle School and Shelby Tuttle as the new principal at Empire Elementary. And CESA would like to thank Mr. Stokes for his dedication to our staff and our students for all these years. Thank you. We also would like to thank Don Carini and Stacy Wilkie for the many years you've been on the board. We really appreciate everything that you've done. A lot of volunteering, I know, as trustees up there. It's a lot of hard work. We would also especially like to say thank you to Stacy and her late husband for supporting our support staff during the holidays as they provided meals and gifts to some of our staff that needed a helping hand over the years. We thank you and we wish you all good luck in your new adventures. And CESA is looking forward to getting our contract ratified before the end of June. We feel that when the contract is ratified by our members, it will help keep our support staff in place and not venture out to other districts to work. A contract shows all the hard work that the district and CESA negotiates to make the working for the Carson City School District employees a place they want to continue to work. So I thank you all.
Thank you,
Questions?
Loretta. At this time, we'll go ahead and call for public comment. And making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the podium or the table, speak into the microphone. And just a reminder, your time is limited to 3 minutes. And we ask you just simply not to repeat something that somebody else has already said. So is there any in-person public comment? Seeing none, is there any online public comment? Renee?
Yes, Mr. Varner, thank you. This first comment is from Betsy Strasberg. And she asked that I provide information as well as provide to the trustees a spreadsheet with comparison to the superintendent evaluation material, board rating summary for Mr. Stokes' annual evaluation, and the Kansas superintendent evaluation form. The Carson City School District Superintendent Evaluation Form has the most number of performance standards. We need fewer standards similar to New Jersey or Kansas, so sufficient focus is achieved with SMART goals with metrics. For example, having values and ethics is a given for the superintendent position. Otherwise, the board would not have hired him. Iowa has SMART goals and evidence-based evaluation. Both New Jersey and Kansas have goals, action plans, and metrics showing continuous improvement percentage over time. According to U.S. News, K-12 national rating, Iowa is number 24, New Jersey is number 21, and Kansas is number 27, all above Nevada. Carson City will be served well, emulating best practices from these states. The review process flowchart on page 5 of the New Jersey evaluation is well thought out and brings rationale and consensus to the evaluation process. No random ratings, which is why we had so much variation in the Stokes annual superintendent evaluation in 2022, shown in attachment. The superintendent needs to present his progress of assigned goals during the year and not wait to hear from the board for the first time during the annual evaluation time. Summaries of must-have. Less standards is better. Reduce redundancy, such as Standard 1 and Standard 8 in the Carson City evaluation form. Maximize number of 5. 4 is better like Kansas. Standards can be equally weighed or weighted based on priority. SMART goals with measurable metrics showing continuous improvement. Quarterly discussions with the board after superintendent presents progress on goals to avoid surprises at the annual evaluation, and remediation action plans can be agreed before year end as needed. Board must present comments, evidence, examples to support their given ratings in each goal, so there's less variation as in the Stokes annual evaluation, such as a rating of 2 to 4 on the same performance standard. The recommendation is Ms. Strasberg suggests a citizen board to create the evaluation form with a board trustee and associate superintendent of human resources as advisor to provide objectivity and buy-in before the June 28th board meeting. This next comment is from Barb Mathers. She's the mother of 2 homeschooled children. For all the talk of transparency that happens within our school district, I'm seeing the complete opposite of transparency. I read an article in the Nevada Appeal recently about updating the high school library. So many books, so little time. It is spring cleaning and the CHS library is clearing outdated, non-circulated, and unneeded duplicates to make room for more books, of course. Each day, students will find something different as books are being boxed for surplus every day. Nothing wasted, nothing thrown away. Students are being asked to stop by and browse, according to CHS Library Media Specialist and Carson City School District Library Coordinator Ananda Campbell. Oh, the anticipation we are making space for a whole new look this year. I was concerned when I read the article because I understood that many books are being removed, which means that many books are being added. I would like to know what the books are that are replacing the old books. She provided an email to Ms. Campbell recently requesting the list of new books that are going into the library. I read an article in the Appeal that you're giving away free books to students to make room for new books. Do you have a list of the books that will be added to the library? Also, what is happening to the rest of the outdated, non-circulated, and unneeded duplicate books that the students don't take? Ms. Mathers is submitting the email correspondence for the record. She asked 3 separate times for the list of books being added, and she wouldn't give me the list. I would think it is a fairly simple request, and the fact that it is not being shared raises red flags. Parents should know what books are in the library and what the students have access to. Mrs. Crossman, Miss Mathers is asking if you could get a list of the books that are going into the library. If Ms. Crossman isn't able to get the list, if there's another board member that can access that information for her, please get the list of books that are going into the library and let her know. And a copy of the email that she provided to Ms. Campbell is in the record. One moment, Mr. Varner. I believe I have one other one here, an email. My apologies, it's for agenda item 8. I'll read it at that time. Mr. Varner, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further online public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 7, presentation on building the multi-tiered system of support, also known as MTSS, in the Carson City School District to include a snapshot of MTSS and Project Aware grants. For discussion only, and Ms. Fuzon is going to present in lieu of Michelle Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you, President Varner. In the fall, sorry, let me see if I can move this. Okay, thank you. In the fall of 2018, the Nevada Department of Education, in collaboration with Nevada's Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports group, they're a group that works in conjunction with the University of Nevada, Reno, was awarded a 5-year grant, federal grant, called the School Climate Transformation Grant. Through this grant, Nevada's multi-tiered systems of support, also known as MTSS, project seeks to improve districts' capacity to establish and sustain MTSS or multi-tiered behavioral frameworks across Nevada's schools through the implementation of school-wide positive behavioral supports, also known as SWPBS. So as you all know, we love our acronyms, so there's some more to add to that list. This year, in 2021-22, the Carson City School District and Pyramid Lake Schools formally joined the project, along with 8 other districts in adopting the MTSS framework. So the other 8 districts have previously been MTSS districts for over about 12 years now. So we're new to the game. So what is MTSS? I'm sure you've heard this acronym being referred to several times. MTSS is a continuous improvement framework. Framework is very important to note, which is data-based problem solving and decision making. It's practiced across all levels of the educational system to support students. So there's an academic part to it, behavioral part, and social emotional. So it's a framework that we put in place to provide students structured supports if they are not being successful in our schools. So what MTSS is not. It is not a pathway to special education services. This is an important one because sometimes even within our own staff, we hear comments being made, well, we have to do MTSS or response to intervention, which is part of the academic end of MTSS in order to get a student qualified for special education. In reality, it's the opposite. It's what we do to support students so that they don't need to be assessed for special education services. MTSS is not a curriculum program. So there is not, here's curriculum, here's a textbook, teach MTSS. It's literally a framework. It's a set of practices, and we'll go over what that looks like a little bit. MTSS does not only pertain to general ed students. That's another important facet because sometimes teachers will think, oh, I have a student who's already on an IEP for special education or receiving EL services, so I don't need to provide tiered interventions for them. That's not accurate. So MTSS pertains to all of our students and encompasses, like I said, academic, social, emotional, behavioral, mental health services. And it's also not a failure to achieve model until a special education assessment. Again, our whole attempt with employing multi-tiered systems of support is to truly support our students and help meet their needs so that they're not in need of an individualized academic plan or educational plan. Some students have disabilities and they will eventually need that IEP if they need specially designed instruction, but many of our students are just maybe developmentally delayed or a little slow to get to grade level tasks. And that's where we want to provide that support and or have behavior issues that are impacting their ability to be academically successful. So we want to provide that support there as well. You might have seen a similar triangle, but this is what we refer to as the MTSS triangle. In the green, that represents approximately usually 80 to 85% of students. And those students will respond very positively to what is referred to as Tier 1 instruction. So Tier 1 instruction is whole school. And again, that encompasses academics as well as behavioral. So if you have regular instruction in the classroom and teachers are providing supports to students in the regular education classroom and they're not responding to differentiated instruction, then sometimes they then require a Tier 2 intervention. A Tier 2 intervention is when we provide like small group support, academic support. We'll pull students, maybe give them a reading intervention support, math intervention support. Sometimes it's done during the school day. Sometimes it's provided in after-school programming. Sometimes we provide some of it in the summer programming. But you're providing that more intensive structure for students at that Tier 2 level. When a student is not successful, even with that more small group instructional support, then they move into what we call a Tier 3. And that is much more intensive and typically often will require like one-to-one support or an actual plan, individualized plan written for the student to really take a look at the student's needs, the whole student need. This also applies to behavior. So when our schools talk about PBIS or positive behavioral intervention supports, that's really where they're identifying, and you've probably seen it at several schools already, but what their expectations are for behavior for students. What does it look like to be a good student when you're in the cafeteria, right? How do you wait in line and wait your turn? How do you say please and thank you when people are helping you? How do you ask for somebody to help you cut open your ketchup packet if you need to? How do you pick up your trash and throw that away? How do you ask for supports or help, that kind of thing. So that's putting that PBIS structure in place is really teaching students intentionally what behavioral expectations look like within a school setting. So sometimes we have students who still struggle, right? Even though we're trying to intentionally teach what those expectations are. And in that case, sometimes those students require then an intervention. So small group might look something like at the high school. This came up earlier when Principal Chambers was talking about, having some groups that the social workers do for students who have maybe difficulty with frustration and aggression, and maybe we're acting out and getting into fights. So how do I deal with my frustration and how do I problem solve and be able to talk those frustrations out with the person that I'm unhappy with? So that's what that might look like at a Tier 2. Sometimes our students require even more intensive support than we can provide in that kind of environment, especially when it comes to some mental health type issues. And that's where we get into Tier 3 supports. And that's when we're writing actual intervention supports and we're looking for outside resources and what we call wraparound services. So our social workers and our school counselors will employ services through like the Ron Wood Center and other different facilities within our community to try to provide like long-term counseling services. Our current staff on our sites, for our social workers, for instance, they can usually only meet with a student for up to 3 times, right, on a specific issue. Anything beyond that's can be considered clinical, and then therefore goes into like a Tier 3 intervention support. So we have processes that we're putting in place to help match our students with the supports that we have that help them address the needs. So again, MTSS encompasses all of those things. It's how do you teach students on the academic end as well as on the behavioral end. Then how do you intervene to provide a little bit more support for that about 10% of kids who might need a little bit more support and can be successful with Tier 2. And for those students who still aren't successful, how do we dive even deeper to support them? So that's what that framework looks like. And again, this is just another pictorial representation of that. Typically, this particular triangle would have behavior written on one end of it and academics written on the other, but I think that picture got cut off. But that's the reason why there's 2 different sides here. But the continuum remains the same. Is typically at that Tier 1 level, what in green, that's 80 to 85% of our kids are very successful. Then with the yellow, you get to about 10% that need that support. And at the top, you're talking maybe about another 5% of students who need more extensive supports. So in addition to MTSS, in our district, we have Project Aware. You've had presentations on this from Mr. Colario when he was working with our district. But in 21, 22, so this past school year, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAM or SAMHSA, SAMS, I think this is what they call it, created Project Aware, so another acronym, Advancing Wellness and Resilience in Education, to build the capacity of state educational agencies in partnership with state mental health agencies and school districts to accomplish the following 3 tasks. So increasing awareness of mental health issues among school-age youth. 2, to provide training for school personnel and others who interact with school-age youth to detect and respond to mental health issues. And 3, to connect students who may have behavioral health issues and their families to needed services. So another thing we hear about from our mental health professionals in the districts, and in our district, we consider our school counselors and our school social workers, our school psychologists to be within that group of folks, is that we are really a desert of resources, if you will, in Northern Nevada. There's not enough services for the amount of folks who need help. So part of what this project does is it tries to help districts build their own capacity. So some of the work that we're doing within our district, for instance, we currently have a position open that we've been trying to hire, unfortunately, for about 6 months now. I do think I have someone that we will have starting with us at the beginning of the year. But that person is specifically going to be hired to be the intermediary between the district and those external resources and can do actual clinical screenings for our students. So by going into this partnership with this group, the hope is to streamline that process instead of our kids getting put on a waiting list. And that waiting list is sometimes 3 or 4 months for kids to actually get services. And then also to try to build the capacity of our own staff. So our own social workers, for instance, we have become, we went through the process to be recognized as I'm going to say this wrong, so if somebody's listening to me, please know that I know I'm not going to say this exactly correct, but to allow our practitioners within our district to utilize the hours that they provide service to our students for their clinical hours. So most social workers and counselors who want to go through and get the clinical licensure that it is associated with their particular areas have to do about 2,500 hours, I believe is what it is. 2,500 to 3,000 hours. It's extensive. It's a lot. So by getting designated as a clinical facility, I guess for lack of a better way to describe that, it allows them to utilize their hours working with our students towards those hours. So we've gone through the process to do that. We've also helped several of our social workers by helping them get, they have to have a clinical supervisor that oversees the work that they do and verifies the hours and provides them mentoring through the process. So we've assisted them with doing that. And our intent is to build the capacity of our folks so that instead of being a school social worker, they can be a licensed clinical social worker, or instead of simply being a school counselor, they can be a clinical, there's another acronym for this, but it's a clinical counselor. I think it's a PCP, but the point is that they can then actually provide more than that triage, if you will, those three meetings individually with students. They can actually then go in and provide more clinical level therapies. And then by being able to do that, we as a district can then start billing Medicaid and getting Medicaid reimbursement funds, which then will help us be able to fund the salaries for those folks so that we can provide that in-house and then hopefully increase access for our students to that mental health support. So these are the projects that we've been working on. We actually started that work last year in the 2021 school year, and we've actually implemented 21-22, and we are going to continue to build out as we move along further into the grant, so that, because it's a 5-year grant that we have with them, so that we can, like I said, build our capacity and then hopefully be able to receive the funding so that we're not having to go out specifically only for grants to provide for the salaries for those folks. So it helps us, the grants help us in the interim fund it while we're building the capacity of our district to bill for that so that we can then continue to provide that support. So the MTS framework benefits. So this is a national model, and they have collected data across the country and many states and districts that are using it, and they have shown to have a reduction in behavior problems, reduction in absenteeism for students, improved academic performance, increased student engagement, improved family involvement, improved consistency across faculty, because again, it's a framework, so no matter how, Trustee Wilkie is working with students is the same way I'm working with students is the same way Trustee Ramirez is, because we're all working off the same framework. And then it helps with effective classroom management, actually reduces faculty absenteeism, because when you have a framework in place and your staff knows what to do when you have a student who's in crisis or needing support, and that all the pieces are in place, then it takes the stress off the shoulder of the teachers or the educator who's trying to provide that service, because there's nothing more defeating than not knowing what to do next if you have a student in crisis or needing extra support. So it actually has reduced faculty absenteeism and has increased ratings of faculty effectiveness. So that's some of the reasons why we're wanting to employ this framework within our district. We currently, you have this in your packets, because I know the font is very small, but it just tends to show you what we have so far in place in our district under Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. That's along the left-hand column. On the top, we have our academics. So RTI stands for Response to Intervention. And looking at it from a perspective of academic intervention, typically what we do is we will put a student into an intervention program and track progress for minimally 6 weeks. And if the student is responding to that level of support, then you don't move them into a more intensive support, right? If they're after 6 weeks, if they're not showing response to that intervention, that you would move them to a more intensive support. So that's what RTI stands for, Response to Intervention. Next is the behavior, so that shows you positive behavioral instructional supports, shows you what we have in place at Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. SEL and restorative justice practices is actually part of the behavior, but we wanted to be able to call this out for our staff so they know when you hear about SEL, restorative practices, it's part of PBIS, but there's very specific things that are attached to that, as well as social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices. So that's another buzzword people are hearing across the nation. I'm sure you hear when you're on the news, is trauma-informed practices and how do we work with students who are in trauma. And then school behavioral health, or our Project Aware. So again, I'll let you look at that in your own packets instead of going through it, but this shows you the things that we currently have placed within our district. So our intent is to continue to build in on this and continue to increase access to these supports for our students and their staff and the staff. Okay, so for our 3-year plan to implement MTSS, the initial 3 years, it's going to take much longer than 3 years, but the first 3 years, because we're trying to work in manageable chunks, if you will, is we have our schools split into 3 different cohorts for training and building the capacity of schools on the framework. Cohort 1 schools started this year, so 2021 was a planning year. We actually implemented with training this year, 21-22. That was Carson High School, Borderwick Bray, Fritch, and Mark Twain. They've completed their first year training and are practicing the elements of school-wide positive behavioral systems. So their training consisted of 6 days of intensive training, and they had small site teams that went, and then those teams build the plan for their school and then roll it out to teachers, get feedback, bring it back. It's different iterations so that they can look at how do we manage behavior school-wide. You have to be actually solid in your practices before you can move on to the next year. So we actually do what we call tiered fidelity inventories, where Michelle Cleveland, who is our project coordinator for this, goes out and works with schools and actually takes data on them to see if they're actually implementing with 80 to 85% fidelity before you can move into Tier 2. So you have to get good at Tier 1 before we move you into Tier 2. So cohort, and then go to tier 2 before you move to tier 3. It's the same way there. Cohort 2 schools that will be coming on this upcoming year is Carson Middle School, Eagle Valley Middle School, Fremont Elementary School, and then we have a second team at Carson High School coming on board. Why? Carson High is huge, as you know. So when you're talking about 122 certified staff members, it's going to take them a little longer to really get fidelity across the site. So you see that often. So it's not that they haven't been doing what they need to do, it's just they have a lot of folks, so they need more time and more training. So their Team B is coming on. They completed a 2-day training last week with the regional coordinator, and they will begin system changes to support implementing the positive behavior support systems. And then we'll have actually 3 more additional workshops next year. So they'll have 5 days of training. The interesting thing is we actually had feedback from our folks, in case you've heard anything about the training, because it was 6 days. And our teachers and our administrators came back and said, 6 days was a little much, and the pace was really, really slow. So can you get them to speed it up? And so we worked with our partners, and they did, and they cut 1 day off of it. So it's going down to a 5-day training. And then cohort 3 in 2023 and 2024, that'll be Pioneer Academy, Empire, and Seeliger. So again, even though it's taking 3 years for each school, for us to have all 10 schools to have first-year training, each school goes through 3 years of training. So it's actually minimum of 5 years implementation for everyone to have all 3 years of training, but it can take longer than that. Because again, looking at Carson High School, they're spending 2 years within that tier 1. So minimally, they're going to be 4 years. Does that make sense? And some schools, some schools take 5 to 7 years to do full implementation, and that's okay. But this is just how come we've laid out the rollout. So Project Aware trainings, empowerment and understanding. So part of our systems foundation is to increase the staff capacity as well, and understanding to support students in class, students in crisis, using a structured and consistent delivery of social emotional programming and specific direct trainings, such as youth, mental health, first aid, and crisis stabilization. So in addition to training them just on positive behavioral intervention supports, we actually have to do training on trauma and crisis. So we have our counselors and our school-based social workers that were already trained in the youth mental health, first aid, and now we're extending that type of training to all administrators, our parapros, secretaries, and transportation staff this coming year. So they're going to be getting training. And then we have we held one formal youth mental health training on February 17th, and we are actually doing crisis stabilization training on August 3rd for, again, a large group of our staff. So lots of training for students as well, actually, because they receive as part of their health classes signs of suicide as part of the curriculum. So how can they be a support to friends who they might see in crisis, and then how do you ask for help and what supports do we have? So there's multi-layers of training for all of our folks, all of our stakeholders. So simply stated, infusing the MTSS framework and Project Aware will allow us to build a system of data-driven referral pathways to target behavioral, social, emotional, and academic skill set of deficiencies through evidence-based interventions in the whole child's education with a preventative framework. So again, just in non-educational language there, we have to use research-based interventions. Anything we bring in and use with our schools actually has to have research behind it, and we have to have the data and evidence that it's been successful in order for us to implement it. So that's one. And then two, everything that we do, we actually track data so that we have a district leadership team, an MTSS district leadership team that we would love to invite one of our two of our board members who might want to be part of that MTSS district leadership team to participate in this coming year. We meet quarterly, so it's only 4 times a year from 3:45 till 5:15, so it's an hour and a half, and we have representatives from each of our schools. So I'm putting that out. Well, I'll circle back to you all as we get to assignments for next year, but we would really appreciate having your input on that. And then we talk about what our next steps are as a district to continue moving our MTSS framework forward through that process. So again, we collect data, we look at whether or not our practices are being effective. We make shifts as it's not. We look for additional supports if we need it, that type of thing, and that's what that leadership team does. So that is the work that we've been doing, actually for the past 2 years, but the most recent update. If you have any questions for me.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions or comments from the board? Stacy?
So now that we've been doing this for almost 2 years, is it being not absorbed, but embraced by the staff?
That is an excellent question. So I think, Trustee Wilkie, the challenge is that none of our practitioners disagree with the need for it. The challenge always becomes in what time and resources you have to put towards a large initiative like this. And so our job, my job, the job of my department is to provide that support and provide those resources and to reassure our teachers that anything we do is a positive thing, right, to address it. We don't have to be perfect at all of our practices. We're learning. We're a learning community. And again, it's going to take us 5 to 7 years before we can even say that we are truly having this really embedded in our practices of our district, right? So at this point in time, we do have, there are teachers that have anxiety. We have these practices going on, and they've been going on for a long, long time. We just haven't used this framework and this language for it. So we've been doing academic interventions for decades. I mean, you all have heard of all the academic interventions. The difference about this is it's actually putting on a framework and saying, okay, let's take what you're doing. 1, make sure it's research-based. 2, make sure we're actually collecting data on whether or not it's meeting the needs of the kids. And 3, making adjustments if it's not, right? It's putting that real focus and structure to it instead of just saying, well, let's just do these things because we do them. So it's not that it's big changes, but it is taking good practices, putting them into structure. So I think yes, and again, as teachers learn more about it and they go through training and they go, oh, okay. Because we can't just say our kids, which you have heard a lot about in the last year, kids are coming to school and they don't know what it's like to be a student. They've not been taught how to be a student or are being expected to be a student for the past 2 years, and we're struggling with behavior. Okay, so what do you do about it, right? So PBIS is the answer. We teach the appropriate behavior. We teach what our expectations are. For those students who understand that and are successful with that, wonderful. But what if they're not? Well, now we have a tiered intervention system. So what do we do with those students who didn't? What extra supports do we provide them? So the question of what now is answered. So I think, again, as we learn more and as schools learn more, those schools that are in the training right now are actually embracing it. Fritch is what I would consider a model school for us right now. Fritch is doing a phenomenal job with PBIS. So if you want to see it in a school that has really embraced it and taken it on, I would invite you to go over and talk to the leadership over there. And I mean, when I say leadership, I mean their teacher leadership team as well. They're doing remarkable things, and their data is showing decreases in inappropriate behavior and increased student attendance engagement. So they're having great success. We have a lot of schools that are doing great things. It's just, I would consider them to be right now probably our most currently practicing with fidelity and having best results. And their staff, I think, is very comfortable with it. Now we have other schools that haven't started. So if you might be, if you maybe ask someone at Seeliger, because they're not even into it until not even this year, the next year. The question then becomes to the teachers, we keep hearing about this, but we're really not sure what it means. So that's a hard part of rolling things out in a tiered way, like our cohort way, is because we're a small district, we're a small community, our teachers talk to each other, which is a good thing, but what they don't know sometimes can be concerning when it doesn't really need to be, because once they actually get introduced to it and learn what it is, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we do that, right?
I'm glad that we're getting like a toolbox for the teachers, and then we're not adding anything, we're just enhancing stuff that they've already been doing. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that data that we've been collecting, maybe for the next presentation, to actually see some numbers and see where we're going. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mike?
I would just say I'm glad that you guys are working with Project Aware. You know, if a family is lucky and they can find a provider, it might be 3 or 4 months. But a lot of times it's even more time before they could get to those services that they require. And so a lot of families will come to schools looking for answers. And it really is a crisis for families that are needing help. So I think that anything we could do to kind of bridge that gap and get these kids services that they need, it's not only going to help the kids, it's going to help their families, it's going to help our schools. So.
Yeah, I know that Stacy brought up about the success. Is there a trend, do you think you see a successful trend by the schools that have implemented this besides Fritz? I know there's a couple others.
You know, data is very difficult. So one of the things that current schools that go into training, part of the data collection system is called Swiss. And one of the biggest challenges, and I don't know if Trustee Walker uses that at his site, but part of the challenges to that is that it is another layer of data entry. So instead of entering like referrals into Infinite Campus, or just writing down on a piece of paper and saying to your principal or vice principal, I need you to work with this student, they have to actually put it into Swiss. And so that's the piece that we're practicing right now. And being first year of implementation, we don't really have fidelity of use of that data tool. But once we do get well-versed and practiced in using that, then we'll be able to pull that very hard data that you're wanting to see and look at. And we'll be able to bring that, and it shows you things like, where are incidents most occurring? What are the duration of the incidences? Looking at incidences by month, do they decrease when? So we know right now, anecdotally looking at not even anecdotally, we actually know looking at our data that a lot of our behavior increases the 2 weeks before winter break, like big time. One could look at that many different ways, right? As a principal, I always looked at it and said, well, for some of our kids, truly and honestly, the concept of going on a 2-week break was not a positive thing. Not that they didn't have great home lives, but that's where they go to be with their friends, and that's where they go, that's their social, right? And that's the same thing we saw with COVID, quite honestly, is, we heard a lot about bullying and how students were struggling with those items, and everyone kind of had attributed it to schools. Well, schools were maybe not addressing bullying as well as they can. And then COVID hits, and students are at home, and the incidences skyrocketed, and suicidal ideation skyrocketed. So it's interesting how you look at data. That's all I'm saying, is that it's just something to be aware of, because our students really thrive off of being engaged and being with their friends and being together. And so it's something that we want to make sure that we're always looking to the needs of our student. We're following our data, we're looking at our data, but it's not something that that it's easy to quantify and be able to just here it is. Here's or here's the reason why we see this spike. You can't attribute it to one thing or another, but at least we'll be able to bring numbers. I'm very cautionary about that as we look at it, because one can make false judgments based on hard data that way, but we will bring it to you.
Thank you. Any other questions
Pastor,
or comments?
One of the things that I'm using is PBIS rewards, and it kind of streamlines the process. You could use it for incentives for students. You could use it for your referrals. It doesn't communicate with Swiss, but one of the things our district is kind of looking at is ways to make those reports kind of line up. So it's not that expensive, and it's actually a great program. So I could show you that sometime if you want.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. Thank you.
Seeing no more questions or comments, I guess, thank you very much, and thank you for filling in for Mrs. Cleveland. Excellent job. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action to approve the Family Life Advisory Committee Rules of Procedures for the Carson City School District. And this is for possible action, and it's Cheryl Macy and Sheila Story who will be presenting. Thank you, guys.
Good evening, President Varner, members of the board, Mr. Stokes. As you know, we came, Mrs. Story and I, a couple meetings ago, and we looked at the rules of procedures for the Family Life Advisory Committee. And it was requested that the document needed to be tidied up a little bit more. So Mrs. Story, Mrs. Fuson, Mr. Stokes, Mr. Cassiopo, Mr. Varner, and I met, and we worked on that. And since that time, Mr. Reynolds has looked it over and, checked it for any legal concerns, and I think we're good to go. I'm sorry, Mr. Russell. Yes. Yeah. So you have the most up-to-date and the previous version of the document. Because it was getting to be so difficult to read with all of the tracked changes, you have a clean copy of the most recent version. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just point out some of the bigger changes since the last time we met. A lot of the changes were just cleaning up redundancies and some inconsistencies, and the document is quite a bit shorter, you might notice, so it's a little bit clearer. The first major changes that we added the actual verbiage of NRS. That's on page 3. And because of that, we were able to take out a lot of the other information later in the document because then it just became repetitive. On page 5, we changed the list of representatives back to its original so that it would align with NRS. Under place of meetings, we added just an additional backup place of the PDC Gleason building. On page 8, we changed the public comment from 2 minutes to 3 minutes to keep it aligned with the procedures that take place at this board. We figured that was probably the best practice. Also, under Article 5 on page 8, we decided that any material that's been approved will be reviewed every 3 years. This is particularly important when you're looking at websites that can be revised and changed. You know, when you have a hard copy textbook, it stays the same. But it's important for us to make sure that the materials that are being used are the same as those that were approved. And then at the end, we have added the list of materials. This will be going up onto the Family Life Advisory website with the resources all linked. We'll also add to it the standards that are addressed in that particular material, which is why it's taking some time to get that pulled together. It's not up yet. Mrs. Story? Yeah.
I'm wondering with websites, if 3 years might not be too large of a span. I'm almost feeling like with digital resources, maybe they should be vetted each year before presented to the students. And I don't know the capacity. I just think 3 years, a website could change 100 times in 3 years.
Yes, and so we can have the committee look at that, and then it would come to you again for review as well, if that's the process.
I'm just trying to make sure that we have accurate information and stuff that we all approve of before we present it to students.
Mrs. Story, do you want to add anything?
I think we had a very good meeting on May 25th with Trustee Cassiopo and Trustee Varner, President Varner, and Mr. Stokes, Tasha Fuson, Cheryl, and myself. I think we were really able to do a lot of good work. We went through it with a fine-tooth comb and cleaned it up, and I think it is a really good readable document that's easy to follow, and I think we made some very good changes. We did listen to all the recommendations and concerns, and we did take them all into consideration when rewriting this document. Thank you.
I just noticed, I do think it's a lot cleaner. I think it reads I really like having the statute in there because that sets the stage of this is a statutorily required committee. On page 5, there's some spaces on that first sentence under section 2.1 that maybe it's just the copy that I got though that it was, but the NRS needs some spaces in that in the beginning of that sentence. And then on page 6 under 2.2, the second sentence, there's an extra word in there. The board may reject the continuation of a member for reasons which may include but are not limited to. So the B needs to be deleted. And then also on page 7 under 3.21, there needs to be a space between October and 30th. So just noticed a couple of those.
Thank you. When the documents get passed back and forth between Mrs. Cortez and me, the variations in
Sometimes
word.
the emails mess up all that. I get that.
Any questions, comments from the board? Stacy?
So do we have a timeline on when the website with the material will be up? Do you have a?
For sure before the start of the school year. We teach family life in mostly middle school and high school. The high school doesn't teach most of that content till the second semester, but the middle schools do teach it in the first semester because it's a semester-long course. So we'll want to have that up and available so that if parents want to look at it before they sign the permission slip, they may do so.
Yeah, that's a good thought. That's what I was thinking. Would be a good deadline. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No, I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of my questions about when it would be available and that the public or the parents can go on to the website and review all the material that's going to be presented. That's correct, right?
All of the online material, not all of the materials that we have, however, are virtual. Some of them are paper copies, and so they might not be available.
Okay. If a member of the public or a parent wants the hard copies, how do they get those?
They are always available. They can reach out to the health teacher or they can contact me, and I will have everything at PDC for parents to review.
Okay, so they are available to the public. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And then there was one question.
I just want to
Go ahead.
copy on that. So why can't we have them on the website or like it's a PDF or something and we can just download it while we're there?
Some of them are hard copy materials from organizations, and I haven't explored them all thoroughly, and so I would need to make sure that we're not violating any copyright materials by doing that. So, but we would still have them all available regardless for parents to review. It just might not all be on the website. And
then-
for parents who don't have access maybe to the internet, I know there are parents out there in that situation. We do have a computer already set up in PDC that's a kiosk that they can open up, and it'll have a link right on the desktop for the Family Life Advisory materials.
Thank you. I know there's one question of whether or not you used to have monthly meetings and you went to quarterly, or have they always been quarterly meetings?
For the Family Life Advisory Committee, and for the record, my name is Sheila Story. I'm the chief nurse and the chair of the Family Life Advisory Committee. We, historically, since I've been the chair, we've had 6 meetings per year. So I believe we're going to stay with 4, right? I think we're going to be staying still with six meetings per year and our meetings as needed. So they haven't been quarterly, they have been monthly. We generally started in October, November, December, and then we continued. We always gave February off because everyone's coming back from Christmas break, and we always met February, March, and April, and if needed, May.
And in the past, when Mrs. Bean had it, we tried to go monthly, but we didn't get enough participation. It wasn't worth it. So that's when they came up with this schedule, and it's worked much better for participation.
Thank you.
And those dates are published on the website, the dates of the meetings?
Yes, the beginning of each year, they will be published once we meet after our first meeting and they approve all of our meeting dates. They will be published and put out there for everyone within the community, the school board to come and be with us at our meetings.
Thank you. I agree. I think this document's a lot easier to read, a lot shorter. Thank you guys for the work on it. Mike, are you making a suggestion that we go to once a year for the review online material still?
It would seem to me that 3 years is a long time. But I mean, I know that there's been a lot of discussion among the committee, and I don't know if you guys have information about that. I just think websites change so frequently that it seems 3 years would be a long time to count on it staying the same.
Laurel?
Well, I'm just thinking though, if it was every year, they would be reviewing the same material every year and that would be repetitive and perhaps not maybe 2 years if it's, just so it's, you can only review the same stuff so many times. I mean, if there's a way to check that nothing has changed is there a way to check on the website that nothing has changed? I'm not sure.
I guess
but-
that was my point. I'm not trying to undermine the work that the committee has done. It just, in the back of my mind, I kind of thought that sounded like a long time, but at the same time, I mean, is there a way to spot check it? Or I don't know what that process will look like for your committee.
Yeah, I'm wondering if an approach might be to have the teacher on the committee just look at the information. That would be the person who would probably be able to
Easily.
thank you, identify if there are changes, and if so, then we can review it and bring it back to the board.
Parents think about this closely and they approve for their children to attend these courses, and then for the content not to be what we're communicating. That's my concern.
And if you're gonna have them meet 6 times under meeting schedule, it still says quarterly.
So in the past, we have met 6 times. We did discuss meeting only 4 times at our meeting on May 25th, but making it a longer meeting. Historically, I've really tried to be vigilant of people's time. Our meetings generally started at 6:30, and I truly tried to get them over between 7:30 and 8. I didn't want them to last too long. So with quarterly meetings, we were going to put out there that, hey, it might be 2.5 hours, but quarterly for them instead of 6 meetings, take it down to 4, but make them longer meetings. And in regards to reviewing the materials, I think it would be a good suggestion for the teacher or the individual who brought that website to our attention and asked us to review it, to maybe have them go back and review it once a year to make sure there aren't any changes to the website. But maybe have the individual who originally approached us asking us to review the material that way, if that's a good suggestion.
I'm wondering how we write that into the procedure. We had a suggestion 1 year, 2 years, and then we've had a suggestion that the teachers review it yearly.
So I'm thinking page 8, after that, under Article 5, content for committee consideration, the last sentence in the first paragraph is, upon adoption or revision of health standards or on a 3-year rotation, materials will be reevaluated. You could just add a sentence, something to the effect of websites or digital resources shall be reviewed annually for any changes from the time of adoption. Ryan, how does that sound?
Excuse me. I think that's fine. You could also have something in there that says the 3 years, unless a change in the materials is identified by the committee or by the teacher. And on the meeting schedule, just since I'm talking, the way it's written right now with the quarterly meetings, that's for the regular meetings. It's an at least 4 meetings a year. It also has the next paragraph for the ability to have special meetings. So I think you could still have 6 meetings the way it's written with it quarterly.
I liked Ryan's suggestion to just put the statement of with the teacher. Would you say that again, Ryan? I'm still a little foggy.
Unless a change in the digital materials is identified by the teacher.
Any other comments, questions? Go ahead.
Want it to be the teacher or the committee? Because if anybody on the committee notices the change. I know, but like it could be.
Maybe be committee member, because we might not have a teacher member at that time.
So the way the statute reads, and I think the way these rules and procedures are written, if a teacher did identify a change in materials, it would trigger a review by the committee, which would then force it to be brought to the board.
Any other comments or suggestions from the board? Seeing none, this is an action item. So I'd call for a motion.
I'll move that we approve the policy with the changes noted by Ryan Russell.
Second?
Motion by Mike, second by Stacy. Any in-person public comment? Please come to the podium, or, excuse me, before we go, any other things you guys have, Stacy or Cheryl?
No, thank you for your time.
No, thank you, I appreciate it.
No, thank you very much.
We're just gonna go into public comment now, so, thank you.
Heather Coe. I would like to know why we have a family life committee. If there's a health teacher, I want to know the purpose of it. I mean, it wasn't voted on by parents. It should be a very big concern. Since this committee came into effect, there's a lot of social emotional problems. And kids are really having a problem since the schools were locked down unnecessarily. But you're creating all this stuff for what? If there's a health teacher. I mean, parents should know whether or not our children are being sexualized, and they are with this. And last time, only 2 people raised their hands that went over all the approved material. So has everyone here seen everything, the videos, all that's on there? Anyone? No. But you're going to approve basically creepy porn crap for our children. And I would like a reason for it. I would like someone to justify the Family Life Committee.
NRS 389.306 calls for this, and it was established in 87, something like that. And it is still current NRS that mandates the school districts have a family life committee, so we're following NRS.
Why is it up to them to decide on what the health teacher teaches?
That's above our purview of what the state
But
legislature
until
does.
everyone here has looked over every one of these videos and all of the approved material from them, I don't think anything should be approved. I mean, that is your job. So I would like someone to do their job correctly and know what is being shoved down our children's throats, because this is ridiculous. And I hear about it from not just my son, but from all of his friends. And someone needs to let the parents know what is really going on, because parents are being kept in the dark. Well, a few chosen people get to decide how to pervert our kids. And I'm not okay with that. And I'm sure if other parents were paying attention, they wouldn't be either. School is for learning. That's it. Math, reading, everything that we are behind in. here in Nevada. And it's ridiculous that this is always a big focus instead of the reason why I started coming in the first place, because I didn't want my son to get further behind. And not one person has come up with anything.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you very much. Any other in-person public comment?
Good evening, Richard Nagel. It is NRS that these things be taught, and we understand that. But it's the implementation of the way things are brought about that comes into question. If you can't give the information on the website, the course should not be taught to the students, because then the parents have no way of knowing what's in the class, how it's going to be taught, what the impact is on their child. It just makes sense. It's logical to follow the steps instead of putting the class out there and then having God knows what happens. You know, something that's not approved, something that the parents have no idea what's going on or what's about. These things have to be done in sequential order. And that's the most important thing that we can do, is to protect the children, inform the parents, you know, so that they can make an informed, you know, decision for the betterment of their child. And after all, it is their child. So if we have the information for them first, and then they can make a rational decision, and everybody will know what's going on, that we'll be following NRS. Because if we don't do that, we're not following the NRS. And it's could be a world of hurt. I don't know. But again, we have to either stop teaching these programs before they're approved by the board, until they're approved by the board and the information is up on the website, so parents can make an informed decision about their children. That's the important part. Okay, and that's what I think we need to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other in-person public comment?
Betsy Strasberg. I've submitted my comments into record, and I'm only going to cover a few items to bring into focus. The NRS item 4 and item 5 was not included in the procedures. I think those are important elements of the NRS and needs to be included. Item 4 was notice must be given in the usual manner used by the local district to transmit local written material to parents and must contain a form for the signature of the parent or guardian of the pupil consenting to the pupil's attendance. Item 5, all instructional materials used in the course must be available for instruction, ... at reasonable times and location before the course is taught. An appropriate written notice of the availability of the material must be furnished. I think both of these items are critical, but I didn't see it in the procedures. I also want to make sure that the board here today is approving the procedures and not the list of classes that is in the addendum, because the review process for the board to look at each of these items in the recommended list by the committee has not been defined, not available for inspection, and not reviewed and approved. Also on the page 10, approved or recommended resources, I brought to Mrs. Macy's attention that the transgender 104, which was on the list on the May 10th board meeting and prior, is not on the list. And she also verified that there is another list, an older list, that is not included in this list. So we need to get the list complete, and a process of review by the public, the parents, the board, before the materials are approved for implementation. So I want to confirm, and this is for Mr. Ryan as well, that the board, due to the agenda as it was written, that they are only approving the procedures and not the list of materials listed at the back as an addendum and not complete. There are a few other typos and things which I will not go through. Those were the main items. I also noticed on page 6, 2.4.1, Chair, the associate superintendent or her designee can be the chair. I thought last year Mrs. Story was approved as the chair, so I'm not
Your
sure
3 minutes
why
are
that
up.
was
Thank you,
change
Betsy.
was made.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other in-person public comment, please come forward.
For the record, I'm Mary Ann Humphrey. You guys may stop me while I'm talking, I don't care. But I want to try to get something in. It's really sad being a citizen, a parent, a grandparent, watching how this whole board, and same with you. You guys, you guys sit here while Heather's speaking, Betsy speaking, Richard's speaking. You've got these smirks on your face. You don't pay attention. It's like we're all gobbledygook. These are important things to people for their children, grandchildren, whatever. These are important things that people are concerned about. And it's like, why are you guys here if you don't really care about the genuine learning of the children? We're not here for any other reason but to make sure
Yes.
our kids are getting an education.
This is not an agenda item, so.
Well, that's fine, but I got to say what I wanted to
All
say.
right, well, thank you. Any other in-person public comment? Please come forward.
Karen Stevens for the record. It's been a busy week with voting and everything else going on. So it seemed like an odd time to have this full amount of items to go over. But I just wanted to say, I'm confused as well, is if this list of approved resources is being approved tonight with the items that we were here to approve, the procedures manual. So is this part of the approval tonight, this list that hasn't been reviewed by people or not? I don't know. I guess some of us are confused about if this is part of the approval of the procedures, when we don't know if you board members have looked at these items or not and approved them as NRS statute requires. So I'm just voicing my confusion over what you guys are approving tonight on this. So maybe that could be clarified. Thank you.
Mr. President, members of the board, the work of the Family Life Committee over time has brought forward these items that have been asked about tonight, and so that work has already been done. That work has been reviewed by the committee per the statute, has been brought to the trustees for their consideration, and that work has been done.
Thank you. Any other in-person public comment? Seeing none. Listen. I see no other in-person public comment. We'll move on to online public comment. Renee, any?
Yes, Mr. Varner, thank you. This comment is from Christine Christine Sylvester. Her children attend Seeliger Elementary School. She's concerned that the educational resources listed in Exhibit B with approval dates starting in March of 2020 and more recent were not approved through the proper process. As a parent, I would like more time and access to those materials before they are included in the approved exhibit. They make up over 40% of the resources listed, and yet I can find no record of them on a school board agenda. As a busy parent, I have not been able to acquire and review all of these resources on my own. They need to be available through school board meeting agenda documents and accessed individually before being used in the classroom. This next comment is from Robert Harris. A few days ago, I was talking with a school teacher from the high school. They asked me what percentage of children do I think the district is grooming. I didn't give a definitive number at the time because we didn't get a chance to complete our conversation. I mentioned the queer STEM class for 7th grade girls, which 50 girls attended, and the 6th grade transgender class. The teacher immediately started researching my answers to my grooming claims. I then was thinking about a Zoom call the previous school board president did when the Carson City Democrat Party, in which the president claimed the board would investigate any allegations of gender, sexuality, or critical race theory classes. This was the same call that I was referred to as part of the right-wing group. I never knew I was fringe or right-wing until the school board and teachers labeled me as such. I've always been under the impression that once the school board knew of the sexuality classes, grooming, and critical race theory being taught by left-wing teachers, they would fix the bias and return curriculum back to education, not indoctrination. The good news is, although the board is not doing a good job of educating our children, plenty of the evidence has been exposed over the last 14 months. I regret not running for the school board District 4 seat, but not all hope is lost. Only 25% of the total votes cast is needed for a recall. With a projected 30% of total voters participating in the primary election, a recall is imminent. Being married to a teacher is a conflict of interest. The current investigation from the State Attorney General is another reminder of how this board is not operating within the best interest of the community. I think the greater Carson community is unaware of the dysfunction within its school district. When the district wishes a teacher well after a sexual relationship with a student is discovered, it shows the incompetence and acceptance of the district. Teach academics, not opinion. Teach the children math, not transgenderism. Boys should not be told they will get testicular cancer as it's an imminent threat to them. The average age of a testicular cancer patient is 33. Why is the district telling children about a non-lethal cancer that is most likely in their 30s? Who's running the curriculum in the district? It's definitely not the board who's elected. So what do you actually do then if plenty of the items you claim are not happening actually are happening and you allow them to happen? I have one more, Mr. Varner.
Please go ahead.
This comment is from Maxine Bradshaw. She's unable to attend, however, wishes to submit the comment for the record. This issue of discussion, repeated from a prior May meeting, has yet to define the approved content toolbox numbering 18. After a thorough, detailed review of the board and the appropriate time allowed for the public to do the same, should this item move forward for any potential approval. This is the same argument presented at the last meeting, which is still unresolved with these steps still omitted. The parents of Carson City school children and all the community members are the ones who should be granted the authority to make this decision. This would then be allowed by the NRS 389.036 authorization that the Board of Trustees of a school district shall establish a course or a unit of a course of instruction to be offered. Again stated, the stance of the school district should be and needs to be very strongly stated that it is an opt-in choice. This direction of the Family Life Committee and Carson City School District have taken in approving these highly personal parental topics is stepping far beyond the boundaries of any school district, board, or committee and their scope of authorization to teach. You as a board need to do your jobs and give this extremely significant and sensitive material the critical time needed to encourage and engage the public beyond posting the agenda on a public site. As stated repeatedly at these school board meetings by parents, grandparents, and the community in general, the ultimate authority rests with the parents in teaching their children about human trafficking, how contraceptives work, transgenderism, LGBTQ, CRT, SEL, and all other seriously controversial subjects. Until these steps are taken between the board and the parents and public to consider the rules of procedure as submitted by the Family Life Committee, no approval should be granted at this time. Mr. Varner, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Just looking at Exhibit B, a lot of this material was approved back in 2016, 2017, 18, 2020, and then some in 21. When would you, go ahead.
Thank you, President Varner. Tasha Fuson, Associate Superintendent of Educational Services. Curriculum falls under my division and is therefore under my purview and my responsibility. I am Mrs. Macy's direct supervisor. The intent of that list that you have, the reason why it is not the same list as it has been in the past, it's pared down, is because I did ask Mrs. Macy and Mrs. Story to go back to our teachers and say which one of these resources are you actually still utilizing in the classroom. If they were not utilizing them, we took them off the list. There was no reason for them to be on the list. So that was pared down. The other thing we're currently doing, because we had new health standards that were approved and adopted by our state in October of 2021, if my memory serves correctly, I think it was last year. We have to go through and we are re-looking at all of our approved resources for alignment to the new standards. So that's part of a change that was put into those rules of procedure, is that our intent each time the state standards are reviewed or changed, we want to make sure that our resources are still in alignment with those standards. So that's work we're currently doing. So again, the intent of paring down the list was to have a clear list available to our parents and to our community that says these are the actual resources that have been approved and are currently being used. So again, the committee's been in place since 1987. I didn't feel it was necessary to leave resources on the list that haven't been used for like 3 decades. So we did pare that down. And again, what we plan on doing and having available for everyone prior to the beginning of the school year is the resources along with an alignment of what standard that they're aligned to. Because we don't use materials that don't reinforce or teach the standards that we're required to teach by the state. So that's the work that we're currently doing. In addition to that, then the committee will be going through next year and just re-looking at then what standards do we have that we don't have appropriate resources for our parents, or excuse me, our students for the course, and then we'll be looking to find new materials. And then we'll be bringing them to you for direct approval. We do have an opt-in procedure. We have forms that go home to our families. Parents have to sign them saying they support their student taking the class. Any parent who wants their student to not take the class is 100% supported. The student is given an alternative assignment. As Ms. Macy stated, we set up a kiosk at our professional development center that is there and available for anyone who so wishes to look at the materials anytime that the PDC center is open. So that's open from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. Anyone who can't make it to the PDC center at that time only needs to call our office and we'll make special arrangements for that parent and or community member to view those. Some of the materials are copyrighted. So it's not that we don't want to put them on the website for people to view. We're not able to legally post a video that's copyrighted for open view. But we can have that available, and we do have it available, again, at our professional development center and or at a school if a parent requested to have a meeting at the school so they can view it. Our intent is to be very transparent. So anyone who wants to view these materials is welcome to view these materials. So we're doing our best to really be, again, transparent and actually have accessibility for folks. So if anyone can't or has a difficult time, I ask them just to call our district office and we'll be happy to make special arrangements for them. So I hope that answers some of the questions.
It did. And then also I was going to say is that I thought that you guys are going through and re-reviewing all of the material here, and then you'll bring
Correct, for
that
alignment to
back
standards.
before the board.
Correct, because if it's not aligned to the current standards, since we had new standards, we're not going to use it. So we're going through that standards process, which again is what we updated in those rules of procedures. And I want to remind the board that the rules of procedure is actually for the committee. it shows the committee how they're supposed to be operating and what they're supposed to be doing, because they are working at your will and your direction. So it's not intended, although a parent can look at it, it's completely okay for parents to look at it, but it's not intended to give the parent direction on family life. That's not the intent of the document. The intent of the document is to provide the committee direction on how to do their job. So again, we want it transparent. We want people to be able to see it, but I think it's important to keep the audience in mind.
Good.
Just a clarification, the materials are available for inspection at this time at the office. For
Correct.
The PDC. Okay, and I just would point out that that is consistent with the statute as it's written. The statute does not require the materials to be published on the website. So I don't see that there's a problem with that. And the parents providing the written consent for their students to become in the class. The way I read NRS in this procedure is that it's governed because that is the govern of it. The committee isn't the one who sends the notice home, it's the school district. And I see it completely being included within these rules of procedure.
Any other board discussion? No question? I'll go ahead and call for a
So,
vote.
Mr. President, before you do that,
Go ahead.
just so the record is really clear, the agenda item before the board tonight is discussion of possible action to approve the rules of procedure for the Family Life Committee. The motion on the table is to approve those rules of procedure as presented with the change noted to page 8. And the exhibit, which includes the approved materials, is a list of previously approved materials. This is not the board's review or reapproval of those matters right now. It's simply approving an exhibit to rules of procedure that are agendized.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 9. And this is discussion on the process for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2022 calendar year. My presentation is actually going to be really short because this is a non-action item and we would not be able to take any action naturally. This was, I wanted to bring it up just to start the conversation about the superintendent evaluation process going forward. The way I want to start thinking about what we want to do in the future, bring it back before the board in the future for an agenda item, action item. Yes, at this time, we'll take a 5-minute recess. ahead and call the meeting back to order. It's 8:41. We'll move back to agenda item number 9, discussion on the process for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2022 calendar year. As I started to say, this is just kind of a conversation starter. It's a non-action item for tonight. I wanted to get the board thinking about how we wanted to proceed in the future of completing the, or revamping the process, if that's what we want to do. I see there's about maybe 3 or more possible actions or ways to go on this. The board could continue to use the current form, evaluation form. The current form could be modified and used, or a new evaluation form process could be developed. If the board in the future wanted to move that way, I felt that we may want to consider a committee to develop the material and bring it back to the board at a regular meeting for approval or discussion, and work with maybe the new superintendent, maybe the associate superintendent for human resources in developing this document. Just for purposes for your review, I reached out to NAS, the Nevada Association of School Superintendents, and requested they reach out to their counterparts in different states, counties, to provide us some material for just review to see how other states and counties are doing it. And in the packet, you'll notice there's samples from Humboldt County, Lyon County, Story County, Churchill County, as well as information from New Jersey and Iowa. I also, just this afternoon, was going through some other material and came across some information from Michigan and how they are, Minnesota and their process. And I kind of like that, and I thought that may be worth exploring if we decided to develop a new format. They actually have a system that they weight the different areas that the superintendent's going to be evaluated on. For example, they have governance and board relations, that community relations they evaluate on, staff relations, business and finance, instructional leadership, and then other required components, which is takes into consideration student growth and process or progress towards district-wide goals. That may be something we want to look at. It's a little bit complicated. I think there'd have to be a little bit of training or modification for us to use it here, but I think it's worth exploring. So basically, that's what I wanted to bring up tonight, is just get any comments you guys may have and kind of get a feel of what we want to put on the next agenda item as an action item if we wanted to go forward with anything like this. But it's some process we have to start. And I think the sooner we start it, the better. We have a new superintendent coming on. I don't think it's an emergency situation. We start it, right now, but it has to be started in the near future. And so I'm just going to kind of open it up for your thoughts and comments. And go ahead, Mike.
Well, I don't, looking through those samples, they all have very similar components. So I think that's kind of those components of a superintendent's job, or those components. I don't necessarily think we would want to bring in the deputy superintendent. The superintendent oversees those individuals, and the superintendent is our employee. And typically, we would have the superintendent and our legal representative as part of that conversation. And I think that would be much more appropriate than having a subordinate make an evaluation for our superintendent.
I don't think it's having him make the evaluation, but it's coming from the human resource side where we don't have that background. And because they put together the evaluations for all the staff, I don't think it's having him make the evaluation. I think it's getting a little piece of that to let us know if we're on the right track and covering what we need to cover. Is why I like the associate superintendent.
And I would say the associate superintendent doesn't make the evaluations or by the state, it's the NEPF. So that is prescribed by the state. The only district in this state that doesn't use the NEPF would be Washoe County because they've had their form vetted and approved by the Board of Education. So it's a little bit different.
I agree. I don't think that the superintendent oversees associate superintendents. I don't think that having them evaluate them. And the other point I just really want to bring out is that we already have a contract with our superintendent, and in it we are specific that that the evaluation shall include the following. I pulled it up. Shall contain at least the following evaluation criteria: leadership and district culture, employment superintendent relations, community relations and communication, organizational management, educational program, curriculum planning, development, instructional leadership, professional, I'm sorry, it's small on my phone and it's a little harder. Professional and leadership development, financial management and business matters, human resources. They're all listed here, so if we're going to change it, we can't just change the evaluation when it's the criteria that we're evaluating him under is in his contract.
If there's areas that we need to add additional competencies to, we could do that. We could revise that. We could also add weights if that's what we wanted to do, if there's some areas that we think are more important than others.
I don't disagree with that. I just think that changing all of the criteria, we really can't do that until we reevaluate the contract.
Stacy?
But, okay, but those are the titles, but underneath is where we could change, correct? Is that what I'm hearing, Laurel, is the details and if there's data that we can put with it under student achievement?
Yeah, we have data in there.
Don, you have anything?
No, I mean, first of all, thank you for putting all this together. It was a lot of work. Appreciate that. And I looked at everything. It was good reading. I mean, I think our evaluation is as good as any of these. I don't see a major reason, certainly over time to, maybe add a few things here and there as time goes on, but I just don't see a major need to throw this thing out and start anew.
Go ahead, Lupe.
I think, based on these samples that you provided, I feel that we can certainly pick a few items that we can incorporate into our existing evaluation and make it more appropriate for us to be able to focus on the outcomes of student achievement. So things like that we can certainly embed into what we already have, hoping that we can have a stronger tool for us to be able to assess our achievements. For example, okay, here's an example. On the family engagement, I'm looking at the evaluation from Iowa. Community of care and support for students, meaningful engagement for a family and community. I think those are very strong words that we can certainly include in our existing evaluation. That's just an example.
Go ahead, Stacy.
So the evaluation form is fine the way it is because it's in the contract and we're following that. Do we need to come up with something about what our expectations are so that we have a starting point so that when we look at this evaluation form, we have a base to start at?
We talked earlier about getting some document that was more objective than subjective. And so I don't know if that's something we want to look at too. And I personally kind of like the weighted, where we put different weights on the different categories, because some are more important than others. And to weight them all the same, may not make the best sense. So that's kind of my thoughts. And like I said, the timeline, I think we should get started sooner than later. But what are your thoughts on how to go about this? I mean, do we do maybe at a meeting where we can take action, discuss a committee without the associate superintendent? I mean, a couple board members, and then have them bring back a document for review.
We can only have two
Right.
board members, and then whoever executive, other staff or parents or whatever you're looking for. Otherwise, we have to open it up. I mean, we
Right.
could have a workshop maybe after everybody's put something together and between those two trustees, and then work on it from there. I think would work.
Yeah, my thought was, like you said, two members. It may be more productive than each of us, 7 members, bringing back a document than having to kind of filter through those documents to come up with one that we want to go forward with. So that'd be me. That's my thought, but it's up to the board.
And I think that typically when you're looking at a evaluation process in the school, the employee brings goals forward to their supervisor and they're agreed on. And so I think for us to set those goals for our new superintendent would take some of the respect out of that job. I think that he should be able to set some goals for himself and articulate those, very similar to how Mr. Stokes has given us those updates on his goals and his progress. And so I think that part of it is a discussion with the new superintendent.
Yes, yeah. No, I agree 100%. That's why I brought that up initially.
I think a workshop might be more, with Mr. Fueling, might be more effective. If people have something that you really strongly want included in the phrasing in here, people can present that. We can discuss it in a workshop.
Would we have him bring his goals at the same time so that we can incorporate that into it? Is that?
I don't see how we could set our goals for what he would perform without knowing his goals. So
Right, no, our goals, but his goals, would he bring that at the same time so that we know what the expectations are on both sides that way?
I would imagine that's the way it happened.
I was going to say that's an example of what is on the New Jersey evaluation. The district goal setting, and then it says who, board and superintendent. So that's working together with the superintendent.
I'm just kind of thinking maybe if that's something we want to set for the next school year, it would be school board goals. That, maybe I know I'm kind of not talking about the evaluation, but if we're asking for his goals and what goal, are there 3 goals we want?
For 2 people to try to decide what the weights would be, because what I think is important might be very different than what Stacy or Dawn think are important. And I think if 2 people tried to do that on their own, it's going to be frustrating because you're going to have to probably go back and make changes.
Workshop. Yeah. We can't make any decision tonight. So what we do is bring this back before, on another occasion at a board meeting, and then make the official motion of how to proceed. Okay.
Should be sooner than later, because summer, we usually have a pretty light agenda so that maybe we could get through it before the school year.
I'm thinking maybe not this next board meeting, but the one after that. This next board meeting, I think, is going to be pretty full.
Well, and I'm just thinking too, if we'd like Mr. Fueling's goals, he's going to have a bit of, he's got his entry plan that he presented that he wants to get some time. So maybe it's not right in July. Maybe it's in August.
I think Mr. Russell wants to say something.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just for what it's worth, the decision to schedule a workshop is up to the president. It doesn't take board action to direct him to schedule a workshop. You guys have requests for future agenda topics all the time. You can have a workshop on this as a future agenda topic. And the good thing for you guys in this situation is the new superintendent is a current employee. And so he's obviously here and hearing what's going on. So I think the president can work directly with him to say it would be helpful if you brought some goals to the workshop when we get it set.
Thank you. Those were just my comments. I just wanted to give us some food for thought. So if there's no further items, we'll move on to the next agenda item, or comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Seeing none, thank you guys. Move on to item number 10, approval of the consent agenda. This is for possible action. So I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Motion by Lupe, second by Laurel. Any in-person public comment? Any online public comment?
No, Mr. Varner, thank you.
Any board discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Going down to agenda item number 11, informational items. This is for discussion only. There's not a lot there, so you guys can read that. Agenda item number 12, request for future agenda topics. Any requests?
Just a question. I know that Sheriff Furlong brought up at the Board of Supervisors meeting that at our joint meeting, he was going to talk about school safety. Do we have a date for that yet?
We do not. We did talk about it today. So we will work with the city supervisors and see which date seems to meet with their availability.
Thank you, Mrs. Stokes. At this time, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:59.